The question I was wanting to ask, Charles in particular, I suggest that I'm perceiving you may be glossing over some of the technicalities of employing the judicial investigation because of the obvious conflicts of the marriage of the investigatorial or executive position married with the judicial capacity seems to offer up some difficulties of itself. However, I suggest the judge may have his investigative arm of his office that would be somewhat separated from the judicial functions, although under his tutelage, guise, and watchful auspices that could carry out the judicial office functions of investigation without using the judge himself in that capacity. And so I would caution that marriage of two different branches of government creates a potential conundrum there, and not having any separation of powers. But if that's the case, I don't have an issue with it. But otherwise, I would say it needs to have some watchful consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. To continue on with the excellent details of technical issues such as separation of powers doctrine that is a confusing factor for probably 80–90% of our attendees here. Even though I have addressed the issue before, it's hard to get that, what I've said, firmly ingrained in the mental pictures that we're carrying of this spiritual battlefield of our mental images of how it's all unfolding. And see, remember I talked earlier about how all the powers at the outer shell grassroots. See, the nature of the municipal government is under separation of powers doctrine. Everything from the county level and smaller is inherently constitutionally empowered to function under common law, which is a higher system of law and is more organically connected to the people than the state and federal level Roman Empire model civil municipal governments. And they're under, if I might expand just a little bit to shore up that general argument just a little bit, the office of the sheriff in our modern counties, Oregon Blue Book has a citation from the Secretary of State that I've articulated before that says, the American county is based upon the Anglo-Saxon county of England as it existed back around the time of the Norman Conquest, which means before the Norman Conquest, and that's back in 1066 AD. They're under. And that citation continues on to articulate that the word county is of French administrative municipal law derivation. The proper word in Anglo-Saxon terminology for the county is the shire. Okay, and there's no separation of powers here, and you can still look up sheriff's courts on the internet. There's still a few remnants of them in England, and there was things like that in early America, and that is technically what is referred to in Oregon statutes as the county court, and many others. That the county court, or more properly termed the sheriff's court, is the county level jurisdiction where 1,000 qualified electors are supposed to be able to come together based upon the Exodus 18 hierarchy that we've referenced before, and that authority of the sheriff, the reeve of the shire. The reeve means reverend, supreme officer, common law monarch for the captains referred to in Exodus 18, captains of tens, fifties, hundreds, and thousands. He's the captain of the 1,000 group of community there. That's the shire, reeve. That's the sheriff. Most sheriffs now don't know that under common law side jurisdiction, they possess the judicial power. They've been brainwashed by the Roman Empire civil municipal propaganda to think that they're only executive officers, and they got to rely on the de facto courts to tell them what to do and how to do it. They can run their own courts. They just don't know. We can point that out to them. Here under, at the precinct level, same conditions exist. We've got the tradition referenced in the Bible of the Roman centurion. I dare say the Israelites were doing the same thing, just grassroots, bottom up, rather than a franchise from the Roman Empire as the centurions are listed. But those same 100 court officers, 100 men, are referred to justice of the peace in our modern American semi-common law terminology. These justice of the peace judicial officers, chief officers of the judicial court, they have the judicial and the executive power, and the so-called legislative power comes along as a ragtag shirt-tail adopted red-haired stepchild of the inherent judicial power, which in common law carried the legislative power with it. So all of those concepts, legislative, executive, and judicial, are inherent in the office of the sheriff. They're in, and under similar terminology, if you want, the county judge. And at the precinct level, it's inherent of the office of the justice of the peace, which is your general jurisdiction judicial officer. And these are what are referred to in the Sixth Amendment to the federal Constitution as having criminal jurisdiction. In other words, authority to execute the death penalty right there in your own local precinct. If you deem it is justified, your jury says so. You can do things like that if the case warranted and your jury unanimously agreed. And as the shell, again, repeating the theme, like the eggshell, as closer you get to the grassroots, the more empowerment you've got. The town constables, they've got the right to be assertive and to make presumptions in the manner in which they're flashing their guns and badges in their own local townships and in coordination with the other town constables around them. And if they might over-assert their authority at some point, anytime in the future, then appeal can be made to their judicial officers to rein them in. That's what the judiciary is an afterthought. It really is all the power at the grassroots level with the town constables, and there is no separation of powers. They're just like an inferior judicial officer at the town constable level there, Brother Chris. And so what we're talking about here is such a game changer that we're putting serious, aggressive horsepower into the hands of the individual town constables and the justice of the peace judicial officers at the precinct level to issue letters authorizing these judicial investigations, but those letters could very appropriately be addressed to somebody that signed both the qualified elector and the town constable oath form. At that point, you'd have the status of your town constable, peace officer, conducting this very, very powerful, quote, judicial investigation. And certainly even the individual qualified electors can do that. I hope that little rant there might shed a little bit more light on your concern and minimize it, your concern about respecting separation of powers doctrine. Again, that doctrine is not a common law doctrine. It's a Roman Empire civil municipal doctrine, and it does not apply in our counties, precincts, and townships. Could you reply, Chris, if my words seem to you to be in error, or perhaps we have agreement there?
Well, I certainly appreciate your eloquent and encompassing elucidation there. I am always very familiar with the Shire, the Reed, and the original concepts. However, observing some of the misuse and disuse of what's taken place these days by having people with less than right minds and moral upstanding character infiltrating the law enforcement services and institutions, so-called, of the agencies around the Americas, has brought to me an ever-present awareness and critical analytical assessment that makes it very dangerous when others outside the local areas infiltrate and undermine and seditiously conspire to pervert it to their own self-interest. And this is where the discretionary line of the law enforcement official or the sheriff or his constabulary, if you will, abusing their office for their own self-serving prurient or political adverse interest becomes a very serious consideration. And we must have right-minded, moral thinking people with Christian ideals as opposed to some other ideals around the world that are not quite as refined, if you will, as our American system had grown to be at one time, but has radically deviated from in the present sense, in my observation and experience firsthand, regrettably. You know, I am a former multi-jurisdictional law enforcement professional and have you know, I've always been pretty key in adhering to those principles. I'm not perfect, and I may have had a couple of incidences in my life where I could have been a little more open-minded, but I've also had compliments from people that I had the unfortuitous duty to arrest on different occasions, and appreciated and thanked me for the way I conducted myself and with them, instead of being administering field justice and discipline, if you will. Tried to conduct myself in a professional, respectful manner, considering the rights of all people to be paramount and important, and the office only to be an authorization to carry it out with a measured meeting out of those things only when called for by the circumstances. And you can change the circumstances, but you cannot change the consequences of those circumstances if you abuse your discretion. And with that, I thank you very, very much for giving it such tender treatment.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, that your background is excellent, and actually that tone that you're setting about respectful and no force more than whatever's necessary is the exact type of peacekeeping attitude that these sorts of judicial investigations would need to employ, and would need to permeate all of our activities in our efforts at establishing our own responsibly self-governing communities. Comments or questions about the boldly empowering propositions that I'm posturing as being the cold, hard, lawful reality of the cosmic chessboard that we can assume greater power on here? Anybody see any defects, especially in what I'm saying? Please point them out. If I'm in error, I want to know about it. But I've studied these issues for quite a while, and I don't think I'm in error on what I'm saying here. And so, comments, questions, criticisms. Anybody? I would like to, before I turn loose of this subject agenda, I'd like to reemphasize what Abraham is bringing to the table here, because especially in light of Chris's concerns about the normal municipal franchisees of executive authority. They've got their own preconceived notions about what's lawful and what's not, and what we're talking about doing to empower the people here, especially in concerns of judicial investigations, this is going to be messing with their well-settled comprehension of how real law works. But as Abraham was illustrating here, okay, when you walk in the door with your group of people and the video camera's running, okay, and your words are well chosen, and they are citing, Abraham talked about the Samoan citing statutes or codes or authority of law. See, when our people proceed similarly as that example that Abraham cited, by citing law on the record in front of witnesses and a video camera, then you can see the wheels turning in the brains of the people that are behind the desk and potential opposition. They're doing mental calculations. They run it through their computer. Gee whiz, what are the odds that I'm going to be able to smoke and mirrors my way out of this unexpected confrontation here? And they do the math. They do it quickly, calculating real fast there. And after about 3, 4, 5 seconds of ums and ahs and pausing and stuttering, they go, 95% of the chances, I do believe, are that they're going to be, well, okay, what is it particular you want to investigate? And we'll start proceeding along exactly what the agenda is needed here. I believe, just like Abraham said, we will obtain compliance in 95% of the cases just because we've engineered the confrontation in a strategic manner. And so last call for comments, questions, critiques before we move on. Anybody? Anybody? These are bold propositions. You know, they could change the whole government of the whole USA right here by getting a firm handle on this judicial power and decentralizing it down to our common people through this judicial investigation authority of anybody with a note from your local Justice of the Peace precinct captain. Last call. Comments, questions? Hearing none.